أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين قال تعالى في كتابه الكريم قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون. No doubt that the ritual of salat, the prayer, is considered to be one of the most significant or the most significant ritual in Islam. It is unrivaled by any other ritual, any other religious rite, for many reasons. Number one, that it is recurrent. Every day we have to perform 5 of those prayers, 17 of those rak'ats. Plus the condition that is applied with the prayer that inshallah during the lecture I will talk about those conditions. Therefore, the prayer is considered to be number one ritual in Islam, unrivaled by any other ritual. According to the hadith, بين العبد والكفر ترك الصلاة. There is one step between someone who becomes kafir or stay mu'min and faith, and that's abandoning the prayer. Meaning that if someone, a Muslim, abandons the prayer, does not perform the prayer, according to Islamic traditions, the genuine Islamic tradition is considered kafir. Now, one of the companions complained to Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam, told him, Ibn Rasulullah, how come someone who does not perform the prayer, you consider him kafir? Why someone commits adultery, you don't consider him kafir? The answer from the Imam alayhi salam says, لأن الزاني إنما يفعل ذلك بمكان الشهوة أما تارك الصلاة لا يتركها إلا استخفافا بها. There's a difference. The adulterer, when he commits this scornful act, due to his low desires, he cannot control himself. Maybe if you ask him rationally, he said, yes, I did a bad thing, but I could not control myself. I was so weak. Not due to challenges to God. I'm not challenging Allah. I am weak by myself. Therefore, I committed this act. But the one who abandons the prayer, in fact, he's challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ridiculing the prayer. Meaning, you tell me, you God, you tell me I performed the prayer, but I'm giving you my deaf ears. This is a challenge to who? To the Lord of the Lords. Therefore, that person is considered to be kafir. Anyway, there are plenty of ahadith that emphasizes on the prayers. Al-Imam al-Sadiq, Al-Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam, again, was asked, what is the best thing to do? He says, مَا أَعْلَمُ شَيْئًا بَعْدَ الْمَعْرِفَةِ يعني معرفة الله. I don't know anything more valuable than knowing God, being faithful to God. أَفْضَلُ مِنْ هَذِهِ الصَّلَاةِ. Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, on the last minute of his life, on the deathbed, he collects his family members, his relatives, and he calls them this. He tells them, يا بني هاشم اعلموا لا تنال شفاعتنا من استخف بصلاته. Our intercession, basically everyone needs the intercession of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the intercession of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. The Imam says that someone who takes his prayers lightly, من استخف بصلاته, does not say من استخف بالصلاة, take the prayer lightly. No, takes his prayers lightly. Meaning that it is the time for the prayers, but I start doing something else. Okay, still I have time. Now it's 1:20. I have 9 hours to perform my Dhuhr and Asr prayers. I keep postponing until the last 30 minutes. Then I go and do a wudu and say Allahu Akbar and do the prayers. This is considered to be taking the prayers lightly, shallowly. Imam Sadiq says, this guy who does this, he should kiss our intercession goodbye, because we're never going to do intercession in his behalf. There is a warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Then it says الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. does not say الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ الصَّلَاةِ سَاهُونَ. Doesn't say that they forget about the prayers. No, they forget about their own prayers. Means that they perform the prayers. But again, they take it shallowly. Al-Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, لَيْسَ عَمَلٌ أَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ. There is nothing better than the prayers. فَلَا يَشْغُلَنَّكُمْ عَنْ أَوْقَاتِهَا شَيْءٌ مِّنْ أُمُورِ الدُّنْيَا. Don't get busy with the affairs of this world. Unfortunately, brothers and sisters, this we have to acknowledge. When we do good things, we should acknowledge them. When we do bad things, also we should acknowledge them. We, as the followers of Ahlul Bayt, we are very behind in being committed to the prayers, especially Salat al-Jama'ah, on the timing of the prayers. Other people, other Muslims, they have taken a very giant leap in this field. Wherever they are, once they hear the adhan, they perform their prayers. But for us, we keep, abandoning it, leaving it. Here Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam has given 4 points of the importance of the prayers. He says that number 1 for the prayers, فِيهَا لِلَّهِ إِقْرَارٌ بِالرُّبُوبِيَّةِ. Number 1, we acknowledge the lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean? You see, rububiyyah comes from the word Rabb. Rabba yurabbi. Tarbiyah, upbringing, parenting, breadwinner. This means tarbiyah. This is from, in Arabic we say Rabbul Usra, the Lord of the family. Meaning the one who provides for the family. He brings food to the table. This person is considered to be the Lord of the family. Therefore, when we perform the prayers, we acknowledge the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is someone who sustains us. Yes, the children are brought by their parents. The parents will, teach them things, send them to school, do everything to them. But who has given the eye to the child? Who has given hands to the child? Who has given health to the child? Who has developed the brain of the child? Is it us or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to pay little bits back. By the prayers, we acknowledge that He is the breadwinner of us. At the same time, when someone brings you a cup of water and you tell him thank you very much, God also worth a little thank you from us. He doesn't need our thank, but it shows our own humanity. When He provides us with so many blessings, with so many merciful things, mercies, it is our time to say good things, to say thank you, Allah. Ar-Rahman 'allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan 'allamahu al-bayan. What is the difference between a human and animal? 'Allamahu al-bayan. We have used our rationality, our mentality. Otherwise, we have to be like the animals. The animals themselves, they do tasbih and glorify God. Also, we have to do the same thing. We have to praise the Lord by our prayers. So number 1, فِيهَا لِلَّهِ إِقْرَارٌ بِالرُّبُوبِيَّةِ. Number 2, وَفِيهَا خَلْعٌ لِلْأَنْدَادِ. By prayers, we will reject any partner to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone who stays as a partner that we consider a Lord, also we will reject it by saying Allahu Akbar and going into the state of the prayers. May you will ask, well, this is not valid now. The mushrikeen were during the time of Jahiliyyah when they used to do the prayers, at the same time they used to believe in the idols. So this talk is to them. Now, alhamdulillah, everybody is Muslim, believer. They believe in Allah, they believe in the message. They come to the masjid, they do the fasting. Still, brothers and sisters, we are, by definition of Quran, there are many of us are still considered to be mushrik. Why? Because we have 2 kinds of idols. An external idol, like the mushrikeen, we used to stand in front of that and do the prayers. An internal idol. What is that internal idol? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it hawa, the low desire of myself. It is my low desire who takes me this way or that way. Tell me be friend with this person or hate this person. Act in such manner or in that manner. This is my low desire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ. Have you seen that person who takes his low desire as his God? And that's in everyone, brothers. Even the mu'mineen, even the believers. You see, this desire, this ego within themselves is considered to be an idol. We worship that idol. We don't worship Allah. Why? Because the practice is a practice of salah as a mechanical. We will talk about this in a minute. This is a mechanical thing. Practice. We stand up, we go to prostration, we get up, we lose calories. God doesn't want this mere act only. He wants what we benefit from that. The result of this is complete submission to Allah. When my heart is full of love toward my brothers and sisters, that I can stand them, that I can be and live with them together. At that time, I have overcome my ego. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ. Another ayah says, not only those believers, you see many believers, you think that they believe in God only. No, they're still mushrik. وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُم بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. Still they have some partner with God. Who's that partner? It's my own low desires, my soul. Whenever I overcome that, at that time I become a true believer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, the prayers, when we stand up in front of God and start the prayers, in fact, we are negating the other partners. Number 3, the Imam alayhi salam says, وَأَنْ يَقِفَ بِالذُّلِّ وَالْمَسْكَنَةِ بَيْنَ يَدَيِ الْجَبَّارِ. We have to show our humbleness. We have to show our fragility, that we are frail, we are full of impairments and needs. No one on the face of this planet is considered to be needless. Unfortunately, brothers and sisters, human being is the worst living thing that you can imagine. Why? Because the minute that he gets power or wealth or post, he declares himself he will consider himself Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the only creature. Look at it throughout the history. You don't see a single creature, including Shaitan. Shaitan himself, when he disobeyed God and talking to God, says, وَعِزَّتِكَ. He praises the significance, the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He glorifies it. But it is insan, the human being, who says, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. Like Fir'aun, like Nimrud. Why? Shallow-mindedness. Little bit of health, little bit of wealth and power, we declare ourselves the needless. We don't need anyone, even God. We challenge God. And then look at the conclusion. What happens to them? Look at Nimrud. Nimrud, a tiny little mosquito killed him. Someone who was objecting to Ibrahim, when Ibrahim told him that, رَبِّ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ, he said, okay, if God kills and brings to birth, I can do the same thing. He took 2 prisoners, he killed one and the other one set him free. He said, okay, I killed one and the other one, I gave him a new life again. I am like God. God sends him a tiny little mosquito. One day Al-Mansur, the same man, the same king, was with an Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and tiny fly was sitting on his face. He shook his hand, the fly took a turn and came back again and sat on the other cheek. Kept doing this, the man got so agitated. He screamed, Ya Jafar ibn Muhammad, why God has created the fly? The Imam alayhi salam says, لِيُذِلَّ اللَّهُ بِهِ الْجَبَابَ. To humiliate people like you. That is the reason God has created this tiny little animal. And we see those pharaohs. Pharaohs are not only during that time. They were not only in our life. Didn't we see so many pharaohs just recently in those couple of years? You know Saddam Hussein? What was Saddam Hussein? Eventually he was taken out of his home like a rat. I have seen by myself that the boots of the American soldier right on the neck and face of Saddam Hussein. Gaddafi, who used to consider himself Malik al-Muluk, the king of the kings, the emperor, what happened? Did you see in which kind of a humiliating way? So humiliating, so embarrassing, he was killed. Why? Because this is a lesson. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows every arrogant, every self-centered, that this is what you will get. This is your result. Therefore, the prayers, when you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we show our humbleness. We show our gratitude, our slaveness. Yesterday I read to you the beautiful word of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Says, إلهي كفاني عزا أن أكون لك عبدا وكفاني فخرا أن تكون لي ربا أنت كما أحب فاجعلني كما تحب. Therefore you see that this man, when you go to Iraq, from miles away you see his golden dome. You know, in the skies, in the horizon. Why so? Why? Because he showed the true slavery to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore God rewarded. You know, there is a famous poetry, inshallah, in subsequent nights, I will recite some of it to you, by a poet called Muhammad Mahjoub, or Majdoub. Muhammad Majdoub, he was a Syrian guy. In his, you know, in the translation of this poetry, he says, look at those little bones that have come in this place, have been gathered, people come to pay a tribute, they have raised this little bone to worship those bones. Almost to worship those bones. When you go and see thousands, tens and hundreds of thousands when they flock to the shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Why? Because he has shown his complete slavery to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, he got the reward. The fourth thing, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ أَنْ يَسْأَلُوهُ فَيُعْطِيهُ. You see, brothers and sisters, prayer is not only wording some jargons that we do not understand. It is asking. If you would like to see what God is talking to you, read the Quran. If you would like to talk to Allah and ask Allah to include the prayers. Prayers by itself is supplication. You're asking, you're begging. Begging from anyone is considered to be the most repulsive thing. The worst thing that any human being does when he goes and asks someone weak like him, go and ask him for something. Goes and ask him for assistance. But when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this repulsive thing becomes very noble, very cherishable thing. All the prophets, all the imams, they emphasize on this side. If you want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Especially during the prayers. In qunut. Not in qunut, after the prayers. A few nights ago I recited this hadith. Once the prayer is done, God gives his entire attention to his slave while he's doing the prayers. Tells him, لَبَّيْكَ عَبْدِي. I'm listening to you. لَبَّيْكَ عَبْدِي. 3 times. For the 3 times he calls upon him. لَبَّيْكَ عَبْدِي. You finish the prayers, now my whole intention is for you. Just tell me what you need. But unfortunately, we don't know what time we finish, so we can run, fast, doing other things. Just take a few minutes, couple minutes, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. This dua is very recommended. After you finish, it says, Allahumma a'tiq riqabana min al-nar wa adkhilna al-jannah wa zawwijna min al-hur al-'ain. This is a famous dua. After every prayer, at least say these words, any other words, and ask big, whatever you want, for the hereafter, for your brothers, your sisters, the sick, your relatives, your children, for yourself, for this life, for the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Kareem, generous. وَاسْأَلُ اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. He's the only entity that when you ask, you should not be ashamed. Those were the reasons that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam briefly talks about them when performing their prayers. The second part, brothers and sisters, this prayer, of course, has magnificence. It has purpose and result. What is the result of the prayers? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Holy Quran. It says, أَقِمُ الصَّلَاةِ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ wal-munkar. When you perform the prayers, there are two beautiful results of these prayers. Fahsha, vice, and debauchery. Fahsha, sins that you do privately. Munkar, when it becomes so rampant in the society. The prayer comes and wash those two. Now you would say we do many of those prayers, but we don't see the effects. Why don't we see the effects? Because we have missed the conditions, brothers and sisters. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. I see some talks. Please just for a few minutes, inshallah, we will be finishing. In order for the prayers to be sufficient and meet its purposes, there are two conditions, or two parts of the prayers that need to be done accurately, precisely, and perfectly. What is those? The prayers has two sides. The apparent one, the forefront one, the one that we see it as a materialistic. This is the prayers that once we say Allahu Akbar, we recite the Hamd and Surah, and do the ruku', sujood, the prostration, the tashahhud, and finishing. All this mechanical work that we do, the words that we say, the adhkar, the tasbih that we say, those all constitute the forefront of the prayers. That's number one. This forefront has to be correct. You should not have any trouble with it. The second one, it is not the forefront, rather the essence of the prayers. The essence, where do you see the essence? The essence should be seen in the heart of the person. He should feel the effect of the prayers. When you feel the effect of the prayers, and you feel that you are frightened, or you have reached the point that you do not see anything but God, at that time you will see the prayers become, we call it khushu' in the prayers. That's why the Quran emphasizes on this fact. It says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. Those who have reached reverence, maybe the word reverence, or being feared by Allah, from Allah. This is the word khushu'. When you reach this state, at that time you will see the effects of the prayers. But if those two conditions do not meet sufficiently, accurately, this prayer becomes insufficient. Therefore, we do not see the result of that. I briefly talk about both parts. You see, the brothers and sisters, number one is the apparent prayers. This prayers, number one, has conditions. Inshallah, later on, as we finish the ahkam of fasting, we will start with the prayers. We will talk about those. But just briefly, the prayer itself has a few things. Number one, it has preludes, preconditions, like wudu. The ablution has to be correct. If the ablution is not correct, the prayer itself becomes invalid. The clothing that we wear has to be clean, has to be maintained or being acquired in legal means. Should not be ghasb. Now we will talk about what is the meaning of ghasb. Ghasb doesn't mean that you go and steal it from someone. No. If there is huquq, meaning that there are some dues upon you that you did not pay, and you have purchased this home, this clothes is considered to be ghasb. You have to go pay the dues first. So this cloth becomes, legal for you to wear. Keep this one in mind, inshallah, we'll talk about this one. The clothing should be, legal. The place that you pray should also be clean and legal. Those are the conditions of the prayers. Once you start the prayers, there are multiple things that becomes for you mandatory. You have to apply by those. Any mistake, any deviation will nullify your prayers. The prayers have arkan. Arkan meaning pillars. Those that constitute the prayers. Those are 5 things. Meaning, if anyone by mistake or deliberately, forgetfulness or no, he knew, he has not performed any of those, or has doubled those things, his prayer is considered to be invalid, nullified. Like what? Number one, intention. Intention is considered to be a pillar. Arkan of Salat. Arkan, you see this building is lying on those stones. You see those pillars? God forbid any of those stones is removed, the entire building can be shaken up. The same thing with the prayer. Prayer has those pillars that hold the prayers. If any of them is removed, nullified, the entire prayer becomes corrupted. One of them is intention. Second, takbiratul ihram. Third, qiyam, meaning standing up. Fourth, ruku'. Fifth, the two sajda. Those are considered to be the pillars of the prayers. If anyone intentionally or absent-mindedly forgot to do those, or double, and instead of 2 rak'ah, he did 4 rak'ah, or he forgot to do the ruku'. Remember Saddam Hussein back in the 80s? One day they were showing him in the TV. The guy never done a prayer in his life. Once he did Allahu Akbar, finished the surah, he went to sujood. Forgot to do the ruku'. To such kind of a prayer, the entire prayer is invalid. Why? Because the arkan is gone. In addition to those, you have to take care of the articulation. What do you say in the prayers? The surah, do you recite it correctly? When we start the surah, or Surah Al-Hamd, do we pronounce it correctly? Or by mistake? Many of us say Allahu Akbar. It is not Allahu Akbar. It is not two things, Allah and Akbar. No. It is Allahu Akbar. By mistake, someone says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim instead of Rahmanur Rahim. Those will invalidate the prayers if someone can fix them, read and fix them, learn, but he doesn't. God will hold him responsible. Addition of any word in the prayers, or removal of anything that is mandated by the Prophet, peace be upon him, deliberately will nullify the prayers. Like saying Ameen in the Salah. For what reason do you say Ameen? Ameen is not part of Quran, neither it's a prayer, dua. Anyone who would say Ameen, that prayer is considered to be invalid. Or you do something that is not part of the prayer that Prophet, peace be upon him, has showed us. You see, we have a famous hadith that has been narrated by all Muslim sects. Sallu kama ra'aytumuni. The way that you have seen me, you need to do the prayers. Now you see some people put their hands first here, some go even lower. So where did those come from? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa was very specific when he talked about those issues. We are not in a position to mandate something, to bring something in the prayers or in any other ahkam. You see, my dear, there is one problem that I have noticed here in North America, that many of us become self-declared mujtahid. For what reason God say do this? No, I don't believe in this. In the US, I remember someone who came and told me, why do I have to recite, the prayer in Arabic? I can use my own native language. God understands me. He cannot be a self-declared mujtahid. For ijtihad, there is a rule. The rule is that you need to spend 30, 40 years of your life studying the principles of jurisprudence, the language, ilm al-rijal, ilm al-hadith, the mantiq, logic. After so many years of study, plus you gain the enough knowledge that you need, plus your taqwa, your piety, at that time, then you will come and you can talk about certain issue. Say, this issue, no, doesn't have to be that way. It has to be that way, just like what the ulama says, the maraja says. Plus, this ijtihad that we say, this person is ordained to give a decree, it is not that big. It's a small, tiny window. Within that window, the mujtahid can do his, give his own opinion. When there is a solid hadith, a correct hadith, the mujtahid cannot negate that. By the way, brothers and sisters, some of us go and open the books of hadith and read the hadith. Then whatever we understand from that narration, we adopt it. No. Especially in ahkam, you cannot do this. Why? Because you don't know the authenticity of this hadith. You have seen a narration that say when you do the, for example, just an example, For example, it says that in the prayers you need to do 7 times takbirat. I'm not saying this is valid or not. Yes, the ulama say mustahab. But let's say someone had read this hadith by himself. He cannot come and adopt this one by himself. Why? Because there are so many conditions applied to this narration. You cannot make it from your own. You have to understand, first of all, the validity of this narration. Who has narrated this narration? Who were the author of this? At what context it has been said? What time has been said? Those are things only the mujtahid understand. Ordinary people cannot understand. Therefore, it is unwise to go and read those things and come and apply those, for example, during the fasting or during the mandatory prayers. Now, sometimes there are mustahabbat, advisory prayers. That's not a problem. We say raja al-matlubiyya, meaning for the hope that God would accept it, you do it, it's okay. But within the mandatory prayers, something that is mandated in Hajj, in fasting, in zakat, in khums, because you have read a hadith that says such and such, you follow, it does not work like this. Rather, you need to make sure that it is correct. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَا تَصِفُ أَلْسِنَتُكُمُ الْكَذِبَ هَذَا حَلَالٌ وَهَذَا حَرَامٌ. If you have no idea, you cannot say this is halal and this is haram. You know, the fiqh, the Rasoul is not based on your own, our own emotions and opinions. Rather, you have to take them from their own true source. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل. The second part of the prayers, and with this one I will conclude inshallah, it is the khushu', meaning that you will become feared from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you perform the prayers. It has multiple levels. It is not a single level that you say this person is khasha and that person is not khasha. The prayer that I perform is absolutely different than the marja' when he performs. When the marja' performs his prayer, is much different than the prayer that the Imam alayhi salam does. Completely different. Why? It all has to do with the stage of fearing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How much I fear, how much piety I have, the level of khushu' will go, hand in hand with that level. Now the ulama have summarized those in a list. I will briefly tell you what this list is. Number 1 in khushu' is in attention. Many of us, honestly, once we say Allahu Akbar, we become oblivious completely. What do we say? In which rak'ah we are? What are we saying? Nothing. There is probably you have heard this, that tell you if you have lost something, stand up and do 2 rak'ah for prayer. Why do you do this? Meaning that in the prayers, when you say Allahu Akbar, you think of anything but Allah. You think of everything. So when you've lost something, when you do the 2 rak'ah, you start thinking of that thing, then where did you put it? And then during the prayers, we get it. This is called the attention. Unfortunately, many of us, once we start the prayers, we have already purchased a flight ticket. We take our flight, we never come back, we come back with the assalam. When we say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, the airplane touches the ground. We come back. Now we realize where we are. We are completely oblivious. That's a terrible thing. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. He doesn't know in first rak'ah, second rak'ah, third rak'ah. This is a huge problem, brothers and sisters. Let's think where we are, in which rak'ah I am, what I am saying, and where I am. Try to abstain. Now, there are ahadith that says, narrations that say, when the mu'min stands in front of Allah and does the prayers, the shayateen like flee, jump over him. You see when fly come over a piece of cake or sweets, how they gather around and dance around it. The same thing with the shayateen. This is how they do when we start our prayers. The easy one is just to do isti'adah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitan a few times and concentrate on the prayer on itself. Here Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa says, ruk'atan. By the way, if 2 rak'ah got accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are guaranteed to enter the heaven. 2 rak'ah, only 2 rak'ah. We live 78 years. How many prayers we do? Only 2 rak'ah. If it's accepted, now you are guaranteed to go to the heaven. Here the Prophet peace be upon him says, ركعتان يصليهم العبد لا يحدث فيهما نفسه بشيء من الدنيا. Does not think about this dunya, this life, nothing. Think of the akhirah. Think when they put us in the grave and they throw the sands over us and we are left alone at that night. Think at the time of Munkar and Nakir. Stop thinking of the dunya. قُبِلَ مِنْهُ. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa says God will accept this kind of the prayer. So number 1 is pay attention to your prayers. Number 2, understand the meaning. When we say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, what do we mean? When we say اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, which صراط المستقيم is this? Meditate about your thinking. Meditate about your words. What path we are taking? What do we do? This kind of a prayer, even if it's 2 rak'ah, it is much better than we do 70 rak'ah, but we are completely oblivious about them. Again, the Prophet peace be upon him is telling Abu Dhar, Ya Abu Dhar, ركعتان بتفكر, 2 rak'ah that you do while you meditate, you think about them. خير لك من قيام ليلة والقلب ساهي. It's better than you stand up the entire night from now, until dawn. You do the prayers, but your heart is completely oblivious. We have this hadith says, كم من صائم ليس له من الصيام إلا الجوع والعطش وكم من قائم ليس له من قيامه إلا السهر. Only he gets himself tired, but the thawab is nothing. So number 3 is to understand the meaning. Number 3, I'm sorry, that was number 2. Number 3, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine the one that you are talking is not your boss. He's not your buddy. He's not your father. He's not the king. He's your Lord. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. At a single split of second, he can make us, die or live again. We are standing in front of Jabbar al-Samawat wal-Ard, the master of this universe. We have to feel the person. Today they take you to Ottawa, tell you have an interview with the Prime Minister. Don't you shake a few times, a few minutes? You choose your words correctly and very, carefully, not to make any mistake. We are standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of us, once we do Allahu Akbar, either we play with our hands or we look at the watch or scratch our back. One of them was in the masjid of Rasulullah. The Prophet looked at him and says, نَقْرٌ كَنَقْرٍ وَرَاء. This man is like, like the crow. لَوْ خَشَعَ هَذَا لَوْ خَشَعَ قَلْبُهُ خَشِعَتْ جَوَارِحُهُ. If this man, his heart, had any fear, any type of fear from Allah, you would see that has been reflected on his limbs. The way that he prays. Our prayers by far is only 1 minute per rak'ah. Some of us, 15 seconds per rak'ah. This is not a prayer. We are joking with ourselves, brothers and sisters. And this is especially for the young brothers and sisters. Those younger generation. Take some time. Know what you are talking to your Lord. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is number 3. Number 4, at the same time that you fear, also you should have hope. You should long for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. Inshallah, tomorrow we will be talking about the importance of supplication. When at the same time that you fear your sin, you fear God, hope for the best. Hope for the Jannah. That's between the two. And a balanced person who has those two, in a balanced method. The fear would not exceed over the hope, nor the hope exceeds over the fear. And the last one is the shame, embarrassment. No matter what I do, still I consider myself, very deficient in front of my Lord. No matter how many times I do the rak'ats, how many days I do the fasting, how much I pay in His way, still I have not done anything. That's how was the Prophet's peace be upon him. It is narrated that in the last days and last nights of Ramadan, you would not see a bed for the Prophet. The Prophet would not sleep. His bed was taken away. Why? Because standing in the mihrab and praying. The wives would come and tell him, Ya Rasulullah, you got tired, you don't have to do, you finished Salat al-Layl. You know, Salat al-Layl was mandatory for the Prophet. Even after that, he would still continue with that. They will tell him, oh Prophet, take some minutes, some break. He would say, Ala astahi min Rabbi. Shouldn't I be ashamed from my Lord? Ala akunu abdan shakura. Shouldn't I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the mercies that He has given me? It is time to pay back, to recognize that. The narrator says that one day, I was listening to Rasulullah. He started his prayers, سَمِعْتُ لِصَدْرِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. You see, I heard the chest of the Prophet, peace be upon him, أَزِيزًا كَصَوْتِ الْمَرْجِلِ. I have heard mumbling noise and voice from the chest of the Prophet. Like Aziz al-Marjal. Marjal is like the kettle, when you heat the pot and start to boil, what kind of noise it's making? يَخْفِي بُكَاءَهُ فِي صَدْرِهِ. He would keep the cry, the tears within himself. Then I noticed that the entire ground around him had become wet from his tears as he was crying. إِلَهِي لَا تَذَرْنِي إِلَى نَفْسِي طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ أَبَدًا. Do not leave me to myself even for a split of second. Salama comes and tells him, Ya Rasulullah, you are the one who is saying this? He said, Salama, my brother Yunus of Natta was left to his own for 1 second. He was in the well, in the heart and the womb of the well. We have to always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always get connected with Him. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يوفقنا للصلاة والصيام والعبادة في هذا الشهر الفضيل. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير. We have been requested to recite this ayah 5 times, inshallah. We will recite it. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. 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 اللهم شافِ كل مريض، اللهم عافِ كل مريض، اللهم ألبسهم ثوب العافية إن شاء الله. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتب علينا إنك أنت العزيز الرحيم. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نهدي ثواب سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.